Hi everyone, and welcome to Geotab Online Training. This is Carrie Carter, and I have with me Jordan Guter. And today we are going to look at the new MyGeotab 5.7 upgrade, the look and feel, and all the new added features. Okay, so if you have any questions regarding the topic being discussed, please write them in the question box on the side of your screen, and we will discuss them at the end of each topic. And if we're good to go, I'm going to hand it over to Jordan. And he's going to walk us through the new MyGeotab 5.7.
All right, hello everybody. This is just a session to get everybody introduced into the 5.7 changes from the 5.6 software that you're probably used to in the recent past. Quickly, I'm Jordan. Again, some of you may know me, some of you may not. I'm with the support team and I deal with the training and I keep up to date with all the changes that we go through in the system. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and start. Basically, I'm just going to go over a little bit of what we're going to cover here today. And as you can see, there's a list of examples of what we're going to cover. We're not necessarily going to be able to get through everything, but these are the general ideas as to what has changed in the new software. As you can see at the bottom, there's an exhaustive list found in the product guide. I will quickly show you how to find that afterwards. So if there's ever anything you need to follow up with that's not in this video or you know, etc., you can go there and find out. So I will go ahead and get started with the actual introduction to 5.7. So, right here you have your login screen. This is very similar to what you're used to, except obviously that plus button has disappeared. This is actually to help the end user, because that was really only useful for ourselves and our end, where we had to connect to a lot of different databases, and for resellers as well, because they may have various customers. So ultimately, this is just to make life easier for you, because there was some confusion with some people not knowing what it was for. And you know, it was all over the place. So ultimately, as an end user, all you have to do is type in your username and password to get in. Still the same screen. I log in, and just as you'd expect, I got right into the system. One thing I'm going to show you really quick, though, is from now on, if you don't actually ever log out of the database, you'll now see a database name there, which is your company name most likely. And if you never logged out before and you connect to my.geotab.com, you'll actually just be able to click on this button to go straight into it.
So no need to log in every single time with your username and password, but as long as you don't log out, you'll see that, right?
Yes. So just, you know, for a quick example, if I log out, I just get brought back to the login screen. I don't actually see that database button there anymore. So the first time you log in, for anybody who's new to it, we'll have to go through the EULA, the Geotab End User Agreement, and have to accept. So just going into a database where I've already been in, obviously I don't have to do that every time. All right, so quickly, as I did explain, the product guide. It is in the software itself. If you've never been into the database before, it'll bring you right to the product guide. Otherwise, you can find it under Getting Started and Help and Geotab Guide. So this will bring you here. And obviously you can click on anything specific you want to look at, but otherwise this is the entirety of our software, generally from the perspective of an end user and who would end up wanting to use it. How you'd want to set up your vehicles, your groups, your zones, etc. General ideas to how to do things, also how to install the device itself, our Go device. And also things along the lines of what's supported, what's necessary on your computer in order to run our software, what system requirements are useful, and the like, just so you can get everything running. Nothing too in-depth, it's basic ideas of the information, just so you can get it working for yourself. The vehicle configuration is you know, the first list. I'm not going to actually go through the product guide right now itself, but I just wanted to show really quick that it does cover all these different various aspects of the software that I'm pretty much going to go over myself. But if you ever need you know, a little jolt in memory or go through it, it's all here. So moving on with steps, the first thing I'm actually going to start with is the options for yourself. So at the top right of your screen, you'll see your name, and if you click it down, you have options, log out, and change password. Not necessarily in that order. To change password is pretty straightforward. If you click it, you can change your password. But what I'm more interested in is the options here. So for a lot of you, a lot of our clients tend to be in the US, and by default, our system sets to metric, depending on who created you in the database. So the first thing you want to do is change the metric system or US system to what you prefer to use. For example, that being Canadian liters and kilometers, and US being gallons and miles. So that's generally the first thing you want to change. The date format is already your general month, day, year format. So if you did want to change that for anything in the database you do that shows the date, you might just want to change that for yourself. Same with the time format. And then we have the time zone. Please set it to your time zone. This will make it so that everything you see in the database is based off of your time zone and what you want to see. So if there was an accident in Eastern time zone at 5 o'clock and your Pacific time, if you set yourself up to Pacific, you will see it at 2 o'clock because of the 3-hour difference. So you don't have to always think about the timing differences and such. If you wanted to see it in Eastern Standard Time because somebody told you that time, you can switch yourself here and then go look at it afterwards. Languages obviously are an option. Depending on where you're from in Canada, we have a lot of French users. In the States, we do have some Spanish users, and strangely, we do have Japanese there as well. But ultimately, you can change your language if you need, if it's for better use for yourself. Just moving along, these map settings, these can be changed anytime when you're in the map itself, whether it be the live map or the trip's history. But this will just change the default that you see. So, again, I know a lot of this hasn't changed from 5.6 to 5.7, but I did want to show this just because now you have your own options to select up here.
That is the major difference. Before, the options was underneath the administration on the left-hand side. It's no longer there. You have to go up to the top right to get to this screen. And remember that this is it's user-specific only. You're not changing these settings for the entire database. It's just how you want to view the system.
Oh, perfect. All right, so, moving on from here, this is just after you set yourself up, just make sure to save your settings. If you make all these changes that don't save, it's not actually going to apply to your user. But moving from there into the actual changes, the summary tab is probably where our first biggest change is in 5.7. From what you're used to before in the past, it was actually very frustrating. If you didn't like the order, you didn't like these databases, you may have seen some summaries that other people liked, but you didn't. But you didn't want to change your grouping structure. You can actually sort of play around with these now. So if I wanted to see basic driver score first, I can move number of stops second. It's actually free to move, and this is based off of your user. And you can move things around without any issue. You can get rid of them. So I could not delete, but remove a whole bunch of these from view. And what's happening here is they're actually getting added to this little drop-down menu, to be hidden. If you wanted to bring it back, it's just a matter of clicking it, and it'll add it back to the bottom. All right, so if I got rid of number of stops, I can click here and return number of stops back onto the map, remove it, etc. So just really quick, I do believe we have a question. Somebody be able to tell me what that question is?
Yeah, so is there a way to do a universal setting, say for standard or metric? So mass editing.
So I will actually go over users afterwards. There is a way to do that. That's, a couple more pages I'll go through, and then I will actually explain how that can be done.
Thank you.
No problem. So again, as I mentioned, for this summary tab, everything is based off of yourself. So the changes I'm making here does not apply to any other user. And that's pretty much this page. It's editable, you can move things around, and it's just a lot better before because really in 5.6 there was no way to set up the order properly. It did it based off of an organized sort. Alright, so just moving on from here, if we have any questions.
One question here, do you recommend using Google Chrome?
Okay, so that's actually a very good question, and I'm glad you sort of brought that up. But this isn't much different from 5.6, but for 5.6 and 5.7, Chrome is the recommended browser to use. It's not the only browser that works. It's just our current recommended just because our system is generally based around the software of Google Chrome because of its accessibility to us. Really quick, just back at the product guide, if you remember I sort of showed this quick picture after scrolling down a bit. It does show the various browsers that is supported by our software. Your question basically was what is recommended, and that would be the highly recommended browser to use.
Someone's just asked, I think it's more of a confirmation that it says I'm trying to find regional settings in administration. And I think what you're asking is the user settings that Jordan just went through. And what I was mentioning is that it used to be under administration. It's now under up at the top right when you click on your user email address. Hope that answers the question.
All right, so next I'm going to click on map. Again, this is a live map. You're used to this compared to 5.6. It's in the same spot. Nothing really with the options have changed other than what Angie just pointed out with your own personal settings. But one thing I do want to point out is the live map has changed a lot. It's more dynamic now, and there's a lot more you can do with it. So just like before, if I drop down the menu, I see all the vehicles that I can see. I can click on a vehicle, and it'll show it on the live map. But what I can do now is when I select all the vehicles, I actually have a list on the side. And I have sorting options in relation to them now. And as you can see, the map itself has been changed a bit. So with this view, you can see that there's 11 vehicles over in this location here and 1 and 1. At this location, they're too clumped up from this view in the map to see them, so we do actually have a little text box that opens up and shows you where they all are and which vehicles they are. So just to quickly show an example here of how that box can show up. It will only show up if it can fit on the map without blocking anything. So I just want to show that if I shrink this, all of a sudden it disappears from the view until I see it again. But if I squish it too much, it's going to zoom into the spot where I can see and make it such that nothing will be blocked. As you can see, there's still this 7 vehicles here, but that box didn't appear. But if I go back and maximize, the box appears. So just if you're worried it's made to block other vehicles and such, it's not going to do that. It's smart enough to know not to block anything. One other thing I want to point out too is that, as you saw as I was playing around with the size, as you can see with the size, I can move it up and down, and this is mainly the way that we know that mobile works. This was made dynamic in HTML5 to make it so that it works in mobile platforms as well. So browsers on your phone will work with the software. A lot of people sometimes call and ask, do we have a mobile site? We don't, because this actually is. Just to sort of show you, you see we have options at the top of the screen. We have our menus here, and as I shrink this, things will get pushed in and move as necessary. As you can see, this list at the top is now put into this symbol with the drop-down menu, and it's just pushed into that. So this is just an idea to show you that if you were on your phone, and we know that the resolution is as good, the software is smart enough to squish everything to the screen such that you can still use everything. So there is a question about seeing all the vehicles by default when you go to the map. Unfortunately, that isn't a default selection, unless you wanted to save your URL. So one other thing I wanted to point out about 5.7 is that, as you can see, if I select vehicles and I change them, this URL changes with everything I'm doing. And the nice thing about that is if I were to copy this URL, give it to somebody else, give it to myself, etc., use it again later, it'll bring me to this exact screen. And that can be really useful for, if you wanted to open the map and see something, or if you wanted to show somebody else what you can see. So to answer that question, as you can see, when I select all, it gives me a URL that says live vehicles, all. If you just go straight to this page, yes, it'll open up and show you all vehicles by default. That's the best you can do to have all vehicles show up right away.
We do have another question asking if we can hide that box, the list of the vehicles.
So this is actually a request that somebody made from us, another reseller, a couple I've heard from it. I'm personally working on trying to get this made so that you have the option of having it shown or not, because I understand that some people think it is too much of an eyesore. That is sort of why I want to point out that it's never going to block anything that you want to see, but regardless, it might be something that people don't want to see, this box. I'm not sure who asked the question, but if you can confirm, I think you're talking about seeing this box, the vehicles. If you're talking about this box of vehicles on the side, you can get rid of that one and just show the map. But I highly recommend using this because it can be very useful. So to get on back with this map, with this option on the map, is now that we have all of our vehicles here, this is almost sort of a health status view as well from the past on the vehicle page. Because if I sort by status, I can actually see how long a vehicle has been stopped and order it in such a way that I can see information. So I can sort to see the driving vehicles first, and then the stopped order and the order that they've stopped and how long, and to see that information. As you can see, this is a test database that we have up, and some vehicles have been, some devices have been unplugged from vehicles. That's why we have examples here of 95 days or up to 98 days. I don't have to deselect all the vehicles, but if I just wanted to zoom in on one and see where it currently is, I can do so by just clicking on them at this point, and it just zooms into where they are. I still have everything selected, so it'll show all the other vehicles there as well. If I didn't want to see some vehicles, I can just deselect them. I don't have to go through a whole process. You're used to this for 5.6, or I can just remove all of them. If I just wanted to see one, just click one. And then I'm only going to have one here, so obviously the sorting option will be gone. So one thing that's really useful for companies that may use dispatch is being able to see how far vehicles are from a certain location. There's two ways of doing this in the system now. So let's just say I want to see who's closest to the airport because I need somebody to pick up somebody who just landed. I can click on the airport and actually click nearest. And now what you'll see is on the side here, we actually have a new distance that's been created. And it's now going to tell us all the vehicles that are closest or furthest away from that location. I can click on the button and it'll show an order. The closest person to the furthest person. I know I see a weird mix here where there's a couple out of sync, but this is because these are the vehicles that are, yes, exactly, that haven't communicated a long time and are, considered to be those bad devices because they haven't communicated in so long. So we're actually getting a sort of the healthy vehicles and how close they are, and then the unhealthy vehicles and how close they are. So just if you were wondering why it goes 12-3, I just wanted to point that out. These are the gray ones. Again, if that color was a bit different, it might be more striking and obvious. The second way of being able to see how far something is from a location is I can actually type in an address. So if I type in an address, the more descriptive I am about that address and location, the better. I can put a postal code in there, a zip code. Here I know specifically that this will work because it's in Mississauga, a city that I come from. And when I click this location, it shows me where that spot is. And now everything is based on a distance away from this new location. So you can either click on a spot or you can type in an address and click the address. One thing I really want to point out though about an address is, let's just say I put Road Street in. It actually popped up really quick. It's much quicker than it used to be, but if you see that it says nothing found and it's still searching, that's because it's saying nothing found for vehicles, but then it's still searching through the addresses to find an address. I really wish I could find... There we go. See how it says nothing found, but it's still searching for that address? So as long as you still see that circle moving, it's still searching for something. So quickly, I was just wondering if there are any questions about the live map.
Just along that, you can also enter in a known zone if you have entered in your customers or office yards as zones into the system. You can also enter in a zone name and it will search that, and it'll take you right to that spot on the map as well.
We have a question here. Somebody's asking why they get an snap message when they select advanced trip history only in Chrome. I think this is something that's happening with Chrome themselves. I'll get Jordan to answer.
Yeah, so Chrome changed the way that they run the memory allocation of their browser right now. So it's kind of funny that I mentioned before that we recommend Chrome the best because right now they're just going through a little transition. It's not just our software that will create this, it's a lot of software out there. Even to an extent, Gmail was causing it itself, and that's a Google product, right? So we are actually working with Google right now, actually today, to figure out a way to make sure that our software won't trigger that memory issue. And that should be fixed up in a little bit of time because it's one of our top priorities because we realize it can stop people from running reports properly.
Thanks. One other question, can you verify if a vehicle has been to an address?
So that's a loaded question. You can check if a vehicle has been at an address, but that wouldn't be done through on the map. That would actually necessitate the need to create a zone at that address location, create a rule for it, and then retroactively reprocess the rule to see if it's passed through that zone. So you can do it that way. Worst case, if you just want to see if a trip has been traveled through for a vehicle that you know of, you can have that trip view show up and then put the address in and see if it passed through that. I'll show that briefly.
So they're asking what if it's not a zone? I mean, it's really difficult for us. There's multiple thousands and millions of addresses out there. It's very difficult for us to know when a vehicle's hit an address unless it's a zone in the system. It has to be something that we know about, I guess you could say, if that makes sense.
Yeah, basically, as Andrew said, if we have zones in here, there's a limited amount of zones that you've created for the address. But if we're trying to call a query to an address that, or just a general call to any address that's in the whole world, that can make any checks like this or searches to see if it's passed through a very long process. So, in the interest of performance and making sure that everything runs smoothly, we can't do it that way. We have to do it through zones. All right, so I just want to show, because Heather pointed out that you can look by zone. If I type in a zone address here, I can actually click on it and find it as well.
We have a question. If you add a new zone, how do we update the history for the year? And that's just reprocessing data.
Yeah. So that's not anything new to 5.7 in particular, so that won't be covered here, but that can definitely be taken offline with a reseller, or if they need our intervention, we can help out. But but that's not too difficult to get going in the rules option. So really quick, but I just want to show one last option here within the new live map is dispatch options. So let's say I did select an address, right, and I click nearest. Whenever I click nearest or I put an address and click it, that becomes the place that we're now looking at for the address spot. If I wanted to say dispatch a person who's closest to that location, I can click on this arrow, I can click on an arrow, and under circumstances where there's a Garmin, you would actually see an option that says dispatch, and then you'll be able to dispatch that location. Otherwise, you just get the general assigned status groups for that vehicle, just so you can assign it to a status group that you would use for dispatching otherwise, which is based off of your group creation. And what I mean by that is you can set devices to on duty and off duty, and sleeping, etc., whatever is used within your dispatch location. So our vehicles themselves don't have Garmin's in them for this example, but otherwise you would see a dispatch option, and you'd be able to dispatch a vehicle to that location. All right. So just one last thing too, this map option is both here in the live map and the trips history. It's going to be the exact same. Anything I've ever done in the map, if I just want to clear it, I can clear it. If I wanted to change the map type that I'm using, I can click it. This is the same from 5.6. But one other thing is to show traffic, and I can actually see the traffic for locations if I want. Green being good, yellow being, sort of bad, and then red being terrible. And then I just have to click it again to get rid of it. As I pointed out, these are the same options that you have in your option screen, but you can set them to a default there. So if you always wanted to open up in OpenStreetMaps or Google, you can there. So I'm going to move on to the trips history unless there's any questions right now. And then we can move along if there aren't any.
Someone's asking if we can dispatch to Android the same way.
The short answer to that is not at the moment. At the moment, our Android solution is hours of service only. However, that is on our long-term roadmap. So stay tuned. At a little ways out, we may have some sort of option for that. Okay.
Thank you, Heather. So to get to the trips history, as always, I click on the trips history. This page hasn't changed much, so I won't have to spend too much time on it. But I do want to point out that much like the live map, I can select addresses and such to find out a location. So here I'm just going to select all the vehicles. They all appear on the map. And again, this is made so that if you need to look at it on a mobile phone, it would squish everything in as necessary. The map won't show until I select a specific trip or an entire day of trips. So just for example, I'm going to click one of these. And I just have this small little trip that was created here. And sort of going along with the lines of the question, somebody was asking if we could see if it passes by an address. So there's no way to actually run a report to show it, but if you wanted and you just want to see if a vehicle went somewhere on a certain day, you can bring up the entire day of its trips and then type in the address and see if it's gone through that spot. So, let's just say I wanted to see if anybody went to that address I typed in before. I can click on it, and I can see that this person went nowhere near this address location. And then you have your answer. So that's just another alternative way. But if you needed to see absolutely if somebody had gone by and you don't know who it was or what day, then you would have to do the option that I was mentioning before.
Someone's just asking if we can export this to a file, what we're showing right now. Yes, not the map though. You can export the detailed information and have a trip line by line in Excel, and I think Jordan will cover the view.
Yeah, so that was actually going to be the next session we're
perfect.
covering. So that was a good question. So just if I deselect everything, I just have this list, and this is sort of the list of something you'd want to see. This is the trip's detail. So this is every detail of the trip for this vehicle, and each individual trip that it did that day, or today, for example. If I want to look at yes, I could change it. Options, I can change it. You're used to these functions from 5.6. This shouldn't be too difficult to use. The one thing I will point out, though, is if you do change anything in here, click Apply Changes, please. Otherwise, it won't remember. And another point, just to further show how the URL changes, as you can see at the top, the URL shows the date times that were in here. It shows the devices you selected, any other options you may have selected. So if you specifically clicked on a map here, if you see this new option appeared, or I clicked on a trip and the trip appears on the URL, I can copy and paste this, or copy this, paste it into an email, send it to a coworker, say, hey, can you look at this? And it'll open up right to this as long as they have the same the same clearances as you. Obviously, if they're not able to see that device in their clearances, it won't show up. But if they did have the correct clearances, they would be able to see it as well. So it could just save you some time. You don't necessarily need screenshots for everything now. And without, screenshots are great, but with this, they can both open it and then dynamically play with it once they bring it up. So just going back to the reporting, unfortunately the reporting doesn't bring up maps or anything like that. The map itself is within the system itself only. But this view button that you see here, this will be in a lot of options within the software itself. This view box is everything reporting. The only thing that isn't a quote-unquote report is a list. And the list is something that's done within the software itself, like this. So this would be considered a list. It's dynamic, it shows up, I can click things. But everything else in here is a report, either created by somebody customized through Excel to show certain information, or our default ones, which are report in advance that we always have in there. So if I just wanted to look at a default report, I click on that report button, it's going to query all this data, and of course I'm going to have that snap pop up because of that problem that we've been having. Just bear with me, I will bring this up on another screen. Alright, so, sorry, I just stopped my screen so I could open up Internet Explorer. So I'm actually using IE10 here, and as you can see I got the report to show up. I actually just copied over the URL that I already had in Chrome and put it in there. I clicked view and then report. And the report showed up nicely, and like I said, it's a problem we'll fix with Chrome shortly, and we'll get it up and running properly, but for now, it does work with Internet Explorer. So that exact trip that I brought up, I just clicked on the report, had it show up, and this is the report that it shows. And these are all the details that were questioned. So as Angie was pointing out, with everything that uses reporting, no matter what I click here, underneath list, the PDF and the Excel option will now be clickable. And it's just a matter of clicking it to export the report, and you can save it onto your desktop, or put it somewhere and then open it up in Excel and play with it. I actually will just show an example of that here. So it's just going to download it, and I'll open it up. And I've opened up the Excel file. Just by clicking on the Excel file and then opening it. And now I can play around with it and do as I please and look at it, etc. Do we have any questions in regards to the trips history?
Someone's just asking about that reports list. So if they create a custom report, can they hide the default reports so the users can only see the custom ones?
So that's a very good question. We are actually able to hide the original reports now. In the report options, custom reports, if you open it and click on the report and go to report options, you can say don't show it on the list. That was a request that was put in. That's a really good question because a lot of people didn't, they just didn't want to use their default ones because they wanted branding, they wanted their names in it and such.
Question is, can you repeat that?
So just for example, I'll just use one of these down here for now. Rusio is an employee in our support department as well. And if I just click on his report and then go to report options, I can show in report drop-down list. And I can choose not to show it or to show it. So you can have reports there, you can have them all made up, and if you don't want them showing, same with our default or advanced, you can show them or not.
So just for the sake of the question, can you just click on the trips detailed advanced one and see that we have the option in there?
Yeah, just give me 1 second, please. So just looking for that trips detail report, this is the default section. If I go to the trips detail report and I go to report options, you can see that this is actually unclickable, or made to be unclickable. I think you all understand what I mean. And I can do this. I will have to reset the server here myself to see. But when I go to the options, the report tab is not there now.
Perfect.
So I guess that's a good way of answering your question. And that is a change in 5.7 from 5.6. So the next section I sort of wanted to cover is the user section. This has changed a bit in a few ways, and I hope for the better for everybody. Again, I'm in a new report, I'm in a new area, and you'll see this view button up here as well. I can always create a report for this as well. So this report setup is pretty much the same across the board to use. And I just sort of wanted to point that out. Clearances and options are no longer click once. That's something you probably should have noticed as I got into these options here. Normally before you saw clearances were click once, you used to have to open a new box. Some other examples I'll show are the exceptions reports no longer has to open a box. You can run it within the software itself. So that's a big change that we made in 5.7. Ultimately, the goal is to get rid of everything that needs click once But it is a slow process for some options, like the custom reports, because it does involve a lot of programming to do so. But if you know, all of you are like, you know, because of our security settings in our office, it's really hard to get a click once working. If we need this gone, it is in the process, and we will have it all web-based in the near future. So just please bear with us. So Andrew brings up a good point. There's really only one thing that needs to be used in click once. Two things, sorry. The distribution list and the custom reports. The nice thing about the fact that it's only these two left are these are options that really only need to be played with once in a while, maybe once or twice a year, because when you set it up, you never have to touch it again. So at the very least, you can get to a spot where you can use it, set up your rules and your reports and your distribution lists, and then not have to touch them. Whereas everything else can at least be used in-house. We still have in engine data like an advanced option, because there are some small things like showing a graph for your engine data to show up. But otherwise, you can still get the engine data to show up within the web service itself. So just going back to the users, somebody earlier asked a question, how do I go ahead and make, you know, a system change, a system-wide change to everything so that everybody's US or everybody's metric? So what you can actually do now is edit everybody on the list. So we have this checkbox option where I can now select people. So if I wanted to just select everybody in here, I can select all visible, and it's going to select everybody. And I can edit these users. And from here, I can actually go to their options and change the options that they'd see here. So I can make everybody metric, everybody US. I could even, you know, change their clearances. Obviously, in this case, I wouldn't want to do it to everybody. But if I wanted to do it to a few people, I could just select a couple here. And then I could go into the edit users, I can add groups to them, I can replace them completely, etc. So it's more dynamic in being able to do things, because we do understand that scaling becomes an issue with databases. And we want to make sure that you are all right with having a lot of users in there and not having to worry about individually changing them. I know it seems to be pretty basic, and in the long run you're thinking like, you know, maybe that should have been available before, but it is in here now, so hopefully it just makes life a little bit easier for you.
I do have a question about the software.
So the question that Angie was going to point out is, can different users use different maps within the database? This is actually a really good question as well, because this is another change I was going to get to in 5.7. So the answer is yes for most map types, but not everything. Specifically, only Bing or Google can be used exclusively from one another. So no matter what, people can use Open Maps or Google, no problem between each other, or Google Maps, or Bing and or Open Maps, but never Bing and Google. And I'll show you what I mean. In the system options, if you go to the system settings, this is something generally only administrators can do, and this is a whole database-wide change. And here, depending if you switch Microsoft Bing or Google Maps, only one of them will be usable for everybody in the database. So as you saw, when I was in the Maps option, and I went to the Maps, I can only see, map type, Google and OpenStreetMaps. Bing isn't there. I could change it to Bing, but then the Google Maps wouldn't show. And this is, I won't get into the details, it's a legal situation, but we can't have both of them available at the same time. But otherwise, the other option maps that are available, be it OpenStreetMaps, or if you imported your own maps, they can be selected individually by the users. So I hope that answered that question.
We do have another question. I think it's kind of coming back to the map. Is there a way to see the status for a specific device? And I think that's what we showed in the list. I'm wondering what you mean by status, if you mean by driving stopped, because that was shown in the live map, where you can see it on the left-hand side where it says stopped. If you just want to clarify if that's what you meant, if something else, definitely let us know.
Perfect, yeah. If you can give more detail if that wasn't it, but if this is it, yeah, you can see their current status here, both on here and by their symbol on the map. Perfect. So I just wanted to, again, go over the system settings. This is where some other options have changed. Password policy. So some computers and, some companies have different rules on their password, clearance necessities. What's good to use, what protection is necessary. So here we put in all the basic options for passwords that are generally used around the world for what it has to include and how long it has to be. So, we've had some companies that didn't like that it had to be minimum password length of 6. So they can bring it down to 3 if they want. They didn't want anything that restricts how they can make their passwords. So everything is set to off. But some companies necessitate the need to have a lot more options in here, and you can just turn them on. Again, with anything you change here, click Save afterwards if you want it to stick. One new option you'll see on the side here is add-ins. I won't really get into this now, but this is a new option within the database and the system that will allow people to incorporate their own SDK code into the database. So if there's developers that are really tech savvy and they would like to go in and make some changes, they can actually add some options to the left side here where they can click it and maybe see some details that they want. Nothing that goes beyond the scope of what our software is capable of doing, but definitely for what they might want to do themselves and just see things a certain way. Again, I'm going to ask the question, do we have any questions?
We just had a clarification on what that last question, and it was more so saying that, remember in 5.6 how we had the more drop down and you could see status, and it would show the status and all that. That is basically, we've taken that functionality out of the click once environment and moved it over to the web. So that is what you're seeing in that left-hand panel there. So when Jordan was pointing out some of those vehicles were gray and that we are going to be changing that color, that is essentially your health status. So if they have not communicated in a very long time, they will be highlighted in a red. Right now they're in gray, but that is essentially where you'll see your health status, as well as the other stuff that you were able to see, last trip. Yeah, that's basically it. So those gray ones there, the last status we saw when they communicated was that they were stopped and they were at that particular address. And there you go.
All right. So, do we have any other questions? Or just move on?
Is there the functionality to send an exception report when a device hasn't checked in say 12 hours to see when a device dies, or is it removed and not reinstalled? I'm assuming you mean when the device has been unplugged?
So, there's no real perfect way of doing that because, unfortunately, with our system, when a device is unplugged, there's nothing to flag that it's been unplugged until it's been plugged back in again. Because when it's lost all power, it can't give us any feed. You could create an exception to say, if it's been this long since a vehicle was driven or moved, let me know. But that could also hit situations where a vehicle just is parked for a very long time and not necessarily unplugged. My recommendation is when you go to the vehicle page, you can click on the view option and then look at a watchdog report. This is much like the health status report. Actually, it is basically the health status report, just in Excel format here only, whereas before you could see it in the map itself. So this might help answer the question from somebody before about status. So as I told you before, there's a lot of these devices that aren't communicating because they've been unplugged. But it does tell us the last time it's communicated and the last time it's downloaded data. I want to make, and then the last trip. I want to make some distinction between the last trip and the last time it's downloaded. If a vehicle's parked, but it's still communicating because of heartbeats, it'll say last communication is, let's say it was this morning, but if it was the last time it was driven, it'll say the day since last trip was 6 days ago, for example. So there's just a distinction between that. Just because a vehicle is okay but not driving doesn't mean it's broken. If a vehicle actually is parked for a week for a reason, it'll appear as okay not driving, and you would be like, okay, I understand because it's actually not supposed to be used. But if you know that it's been driving for an entire week, and it still shows that it's been 6 days since its last trip, then you need to be careful and maybe check on this device to see why it's not communicating with its trip data, but it is communicating.
And this report is made to be put on the dashboard as well. If you just scroll down, it should give you the chart. There we go. So this is a great way, a good quick snapshot when you log into the database. I recommend turning this on for all databases. You can have it right at the top. You log in every day. You'll see, how many you have in red, how many are in green, how many yellow. I mean, ideally, you want to see everything in green or yellow, never anything in red. But it gives you a good snapshot that, hey, there could be a problem. Click on the report, open it up. You can drill down to see which vehicle is not communicating, and then you can begin your troubleshooting from there.
So this does follow with the status question from before. This is the other way of seeing the current status page, just without having to go to the map page and seeing it how we showed you before. And this is more in line with what you were used to in the past. So just make yes. I see that there's another question.
Yeah. Can you set up a notification for a device not communicating and receive an email as such?
I'll cover that. So in the watchdog report, and this is a little bit more advanced, but I'm going to just explain something and try and be as simple as possible. So in the watchdog report, on Jordan's screen, you can see something right now. It says, send report, and then it says true. So basically our reporting system, when it goes to send an emailed report, it looks and makes sure that that says true. I have put a formula in the report that actually will look at the column of the device status, and it checks for anything that says not communicating. So if anything in that list says not communicating, it will say true, which means it will send the report. If everything is okay, it'll say false, and the report will never send to you. The reason we did that was because we found when we made the watchdog report that people were getting it every single day, and sometimes there weren't any issues with it, and it just became spam for them. This way, when we set it up like this, they'll only receive the email if there's an issue. So they know, if they've received a watchdog report, there's a problem and they need to look at it. If you have any questions about it, you can definitely reach out to our support team, or your reseller if you're an end user, and we can definitely assist.
All right. So somebody did ask a question about just how to do customer stops, and in fairness, they said they didn't want to spend all the time here in a call. But again, the question was basically how can I learn something about the software? So right now, the best way to go about it is in the Geotab guide and the product guide. If you find that something not there, but you feel like it should be, or you just want to know where it could be, that is definitely something you should tell your reseller to tell us, or your dealer and tell us. Because they can let us know that maybe there's some information missing that should be in here. And if it's not, by all means, we want to make sure all the information is there for you to be able to do what you need to do. Because what's easiest for everybody is if you have your hands on something, it makes life easier for everybody, right? So that would be a good feature request, as Andrew was pointing out before, to have us incorporate into our current product guide to show how to do it. Perfect. Do we have any other questions?
Oh, someone's just asking, they're not sure if this has been discussed, which it had earlier, but we'll cover it again. Basically, they wanted to know if there's a dedicated mobile application. So Jordan was mentioning before, we've made this new version dynamic enough so that it will fit on any mobile platform. So you can see as Jordan's shrinking things, there we go. So if he shrinks this, you'll see that the buttons along the top, the side panel moved away. Now the buttons at the top are underneath that gear icon on the top right. So if you were to view this on your iPhone or your Android, all you have to do is just browse to my.geotab.com and it will work perfectly.
Yeah, that's one of the new features of 5.7 that we believe to be very useful. And for those of you who are tech savvy at all, why HTML5 is very useful for things like this. So we didn't need a dedicated mobile site for our MyGeotab software. Any other questions? I believe we don't have any right now, so I'm just going to move on. We only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to try and cover what we can here. And I apologize, everybody, when that pops up. All right, so just moving on here is NFC options. For those of you who use NFC or driver keys, this will be familiar with you. For those of you who don't, NFC is an option where a driver can actually have an NFC key, which is a key like a key fob where you can just scan near something, with their driver ID on it. And when they go into a vehicle, they scan it, and all of a sudden now the vehicle in our system knows who is driving this vehicle and when. So if people need to be held accountable for the driving time, or just knowing how long somebody spent driving in a certain vehicle, or who was in the vehicle at a certain time, it's very useful for that. And one thing that, for some of you, you may have noticed, drivers have disappeared from the activity log, and it's not anywhere that you can see. So no matter where I go, it's not there. They've actually been incorporated into users now. And what I mean by that is, for example, if I go to my own user, you now see that there's a driver tab under them. And you can make that person a driver or not. So if it's somebody you just want to make a driver, but you didn't want them logging into the system, you can make their security clearance just nothing. So they won't have any options or any access to the website itself, to MyGeotab, but they will be able to log into the driver, have driver keys. And as you can see, there's the NFC key option here. For those of you who use it in 5.6, you had to scan the key and it would add a driver to the system. But now you just type it into the driver or user, if you would, directly into that text box with their tag number. And then you would just save it, and then you're ready to use it already. You don't have to go through a process of scanning keys anymore. It's just a matter of typing it in here and having it done. Same with the old Go keys, just if you wanted a driver, if you still had the old Go keys, but you want them to also have a new one, because you have a mixture of Go 4 V3s and Go 6s, you can actually use both for a driver. So we found this to be very useful, more dynamic, and specifically having them both in one user was a request that made a lot of sense to us. And it works just like it did before, except it's now pretty much under, sorry, for the Go keys, it works how it did before, but now it's under user. And you can assign key how you used to by having them click once, open up, or just typing in the serial number. So again, as always, save after you make the changes for it to be incorporated. But otherwise, this is probably, for anybody who uses driver keys, this is going to be a very big change. But just note that you can as a user, I know this says email, and it'll be changed to email address. You don't actually have to type in an email for a user to be added to the system, but it will give you a warning for the options that aren't available to a user if they don't have their email address used for their email name here. So I just wanted to point that out too. So you can have it not be an email, but if you don't have it as an email, there's options you won't be able to do, like getting reports or being able to use the HOS system. Do we have any other questions?
Do you have to assign the driver key before they tap it to the vehicle, or vice versa?
So in the new system, you don't have to tap the driver key at all anymore to get it into the system. It's just a matter of typing it in and using it. So if you actually tap the NFC key before using it, it's not going to have a driver assigned to it. It's just going to be an unknown driver. But if you had it assigned to somebody, then it would be that driver. And that would just be a matter of typing in a number. So if I had the T1000 key and I scanned it into a vehicle and it wasn't used on this driver yet, it would be unknown driver. But the second I click save here, from then on, anytime that key is used, this Jordan character would be the driver for the vehicle.
Someone's just asking, I was just going to put it in the window here, but it may be good to bring up. Somebody's just asking in 5.7, they see the in-vehicle Audible alert show up, and they were wondering if it will actually tell them why.
That's a good question. And for those of you who aren't sure what they're talking about, I'm pretty sure in engine data, when you have a vehicle show up, if a vehicle beeps because of driver feedback for a vehicle, it actually say now that it was beeping. Right now it won't show you why it was beeping, so if you had every single driver feedback selected, you would be confused as to what the cause was. But the plan is to have it show what the cause of the beeping was. And I do know that the development team and firmware team are working on this together to make sure that it's in the system.
Another good thing is, if you have driver feedback turned on, it's best to have that rule turned on as well that relates to that driver feedback, because then you could essentially, the way it is now, obviously because we can't see exactly the reason why, you can see what time the audible alert was, and then you can run an exceptions report and look at that time and see exactly what rule they broke then. I mean, the driver should know why it beeped at them, because they will have done some sort of activity that should, warrant a beeping at them. But absolutely, like Jordan said, we will be coming out with that feature, but this will just help in the meantime.
That's a very good point. Do we have any other questions?
Somebody says, how about reports on engine status, i.e. the fault codes and oil changes required, whatever else may be under the maintenance tab?
Okay, so yes, reporting is actually available for that. I didn't want to go through this too much because we are running a bit out of time, and maintenance reports wasn't fully covered. It still works the way it did, which is why I didn't cover too much. It's just not click once anymore. But just like everything else, you can create a report for it. Now, if somebody's asking about scheduled reports, this would fall under line of similar to what the watchdog report does with what Angie mentioned before, for the reporting and only sending when a certain criteria is met that falls in line with when you might want an oil change done or a tire rotation. A bit of time for questions, but we don't have enough time to cover anything specifically. So it's open forum now, and any questions that you might want to ask in the last 4 minutes,
And
go ahead with.
Please feel free, this was meant to be a general overview of 5.7. Please feel free to reach out to your resellers for a deeper dive on the solution at any point in time. And yeah, that's obviously also at your fingertips.
And just before we get into the last questions, I did want to point out one last thing. Under the activity log, we do have HOS now. This is to use with our Android application of Geotab Drive, which I will not cover here because that will be separate. But just so you know that the HOS now is within the 5.7 system.
Someone just asking, can you show us how to assign a report to a user? For example, send Jordan a device report every Monday.
Unfortunately, that's something you'll have to go to your reseller for. We just wanted to cover the new changes in 5.7, and that would be the same as in 5.6. And that hasn't changed. Alright, so we're just looking through the last bit of questions. It doesn't seem like we have any.
A lot of these other questions that we're seeing pop up, it's best to just go to your reseller and ask them these questions. You know, someone's asking about schedule and when it's released. This 5.7 is fully released. Your databases should be upgraded to this version.
Yeah, so some of these questions will have to be taken offline because they're very specific. As for schedules, that's a reseller and Geotab discussion that they have to have. And somebody asked a question like, how do you log on to a specific server? You don't need to. You just have to go to my.geotab.com and put in the credentials. Everything is on the same federation, so you don't have to type in a specific server. This will appear after you get onto a database, this 6, just because this database happens to be on my 6. Perfect. And that's all I can cover for now. I believe we're running out of time.
Yep, I think we're good. Everything else, please definitely reach out to your reseller for any questions that we haven't been able to answer for you. And they can definitely assist, and if they're not able to, you know, they are always in contact with our support team and can help out.
Perfect.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for MyGeotab 5.7 update training. Please stay tuned for more Geotab training webinars.